Jack had walked through war zones with bullets screaming past his ears, yet nothing prepared him for what he witnessed on that warm afternoon in the park. A young woman with only one leg, struggling just to stay upright, was being brutally beaten by a man twice her size. In that instant, the soldier in him surged to life. Jack charged forward without a moment's hesitation, never imagining that this single act of courage would pull him into a battle far deeper and far darker than any he had ever faced. Because saving her from that attack was only the beginning. If you love powerful stories of loyalty, courage, redemption, and the strength of the human spirit, make sure to subscribe now so you never miss the next journey. The late afternoon sun fell gently across the city park, casting long ribbons of gold between the rows of trees and warming the stoned pathways that curved through the grass like old forgotten trails. Jack Carter walked there as he often did, quiet, steady, carrying the weight of years that never fully left a soldier's bones. He was in his late 40s, tall and broad-shouldered, with ash and silver hair brushed back loosely and a beard that carried the same muted color, trimmed but still rugged. Time and conflict had carved faint lines into his face, not harsh ones, but the kind that spoke of loss, of loyalty, and of the kind of patience only men who had walked through war could hold. A backpack hung on one shoulder, worn but cared for, and beside him trotted Ranger. Ranger was a full-grown German shepherd with a thick tan and black coat, intelligent amber eyes, and the gait of a creature constantly balancing protectiveness with calm. At 6 years old, he was powerful but steady, and deeply attuned to Jack's emotional shifts. Their bond was a quiet conversation that never needed words. Jack was heading toward the park exit when Ranger made a low, alert sound. Not a growl, merely a soft exhale of focus. Jack followed his gaze and saw her. The girl was small, maybe mid-20s, with soft brown hair tied loosely behind her and features still young but weathered by something life had carved into her too early. She moved with a single metal crutch under one arm, her left leg ending just below the knee in a clean prosthetic covered by a simple sleeve. Yet, despite the imbalance, despite the strain on her shoulders, she was pushing a wheelchair. Inside it sat an elderly woman, thin and quiet, white hair pulled into a bun and hands folded over a small purse. The old woman looked nervous about crossing the wide pedestrian lane, glancing at the flow of people with the timid uncertainty of someone who no longer trusted their steps. The girl leaned forward with a determined breath and pushed the chair steadily, each movement deliberate. Jack felt something tighten in his chest, something like respect blooming quietly. There was compassion in the way she moved, slow, yes, but unwavering, and a warmth in her eyes as she murmured something to comfort the elderly woman. It was the kind of goodness people rarely displayed when they thought nobody was watching. Ranger's tail swayed slightly, sensing Jack's shift in mood. When the girl finished helping the elderly woman to a shaded bench, she smiled at her with a tenderness that made the tired old lady's eyes brighten. Then she turned to continue down the path on her crutch, shoulders rising and falling with the familiar rhythm of someone long used to working twice as hard as others just to move through the day. Jack took one last look before walking on, but the image lingered in his mind. Kindness wrapped in vulnerability, courage disguised as quiet effort. He felt the faint pull of recognition, the instinct that had guided him countless times overseas. This is someone worth protecting. Ranger suddenly stiffened. The peaceful moment shattered a heartbeat later. From the left side of the park's walkway, a man stormed toward the girl. Tall, broad, early 30s, dressed sharply but with an ugly tension coiled in his posture. His jaw clenched as if permanently accustomed to anger. His eyes were sharp, mean, and boiling at something far deeper than the moment at hand. He moved with the kind of reckless force Jack had seen in unstable recruits before they broke under pressure. Before the girl even had time to turn, the man shoved her hard. She hit the pavement with a cry, her crutch clattering across the ground. The man's face twisted with fury as he yanked at her bag, then struck her shoulder with the back of his hand. She tried to push herself away, terrified, hands trembling. Jack felt everything in his bloodstream change. There was no hesitation, not even half a thought between witness and action. Ranger barked, sharp and protective, and Jack was already moving, the old soldier in him rising like a shadow he could never lose. The woman cried out again as the man raised his arm for another blow. Jack reached him before the strike fell, gripping the man's arm and wrenching it behind his back in one swift, controlled movement. The attacker shouted in pain and stumbled, caught completely off guard. Ranger planted himself in front of the fallen girl, teeth bared, controlled, focused, not attacking, only guarding. The girl looked up at Jack, her eyes wide with fear and disbelief, her breath shaking as if the world had suddenly tilted. Jack met her gaze briefly, then tightened his hold on the struggling man. Anger simmered beneath his ribs, not wild anger, but the cold, disciplined kind forged in the quiet seconds before battle. He could feel his pulse climbing, not because he feared the threat, but because he recognized it. Some people hurt others not out of impulse, but out of habit. Jack knew the type too well. He pinned the man easily, his voice low and steady as he said, "It's over. You're done." And as the man's resistance faltered beneath him, Jack felt the weight of the moment settle into place. He had seen a girl choose kindness when she didn't have to, and now he would choose to protect her just as instinctively. The sun dipped lower, the last warm rays stretching across the pavement where her crutch lay fallen. The day had begun gently, but Jack sensed that something much larger had just begun. The shadows stretched longer along the stone walkway as Jack tightened his grip on the man he had just subdued. The attacker's breath came out in ragged bursts, half fury, half fear, but the fight was gone from him. Jack could feel it in the slackness of his muscles. Ranger remained by the fallen girl, the shepherd's posture alert yet careful, as if he understood her fragility. The girl struggled to sit upright, brushing trembling fingers against the scrapes on her palms. Jack released the man just enough to force him to his feet, but kept a firm hand on the back of his collar. Jack's voice was low and controlled as he said, "You're going to stand right there and you're not going to move." The man spat a curse, but Jack's stare silenced him. Then Jack turned his attention to the girl. "Are you hurt anywhere else?" he asked. She shook her head at first, then winced as she shifted her weight. When she tried to speak, her voice broke. "My crutch. I dropped it." Jack gestured gently. "It's all right. Stay seated." Ranger stepped closer, resting his head lightly against her shoulder, a gesture so soft it made her eyes brim. She reached out automatically, fingers brushing through his fur. "He won't hurt you," Jack said. "My dog knows good people." She let out a shaky breath, then nodded. I'm Emily." Her voice was soft but carried a stubborn, flickering strength, the kind of strength Jack had seen in soldiers who refused to break even when the world pushed them to the ground. Emily Ward. The name stirred something distant in Jack's memory, a soft echo he couldn't place yet. The attacker barked a harsh laugh. "Emily Ward," he sneered. "Always getting in the way, aren't you?" Jack's eyes narrowed. "You know her." "Know her," the man snapped. "She's my sister." Emily flinched, shoulders tightening. "Half-brother," she whispered, correcting him with quiet dread. Jack let that settle. The resemblance was faint but present, the same angular cheekbones, the same dark blonde hair. But where Emily's features were gentle and weary from hardship, his were twisted with entitlement and resentment, the kind acquired through years of getting his way by force. "Why are you attacking her?" Jack demanded. "Family doesn't do that." The man scoffed. "Family? She's a burden. She's been hand-fed everything her whole life, and now she wants to take the house, too." Emily's expression shattered. Jack saw a deep hurt there, the kind only someone once trusted could inflict. "That house is mine," Emily said quietly. "Dad left it to—" "Dad," the man spat, "he left you nothing. And Mom needs that house. Not you. You don't even work. You don't do anything." Jack's jaw clenched. He had known this kind of cruelty before, not the physical kind, but the kind that tore someone's spirit apart. Emily took a shaky breath as if gathering courage. "He wasn't even your father," she whispered. "Samuel Ward was mine, and he wanted me to stay there." The name hit Jack like a jolt of electricity. Samuel Ward. A tall, calm soldier with a slow smile and a steady aim. A man Jack had trusted with his life more than once. A man who had written letters home about his daughter, his little M, the one thing he wanted to survive for. Suddenly, the past and present collided. Jack looked at Emily with new eyes, not just a stranger he had chosen to protect, but the daughter of a man he had once called brother. "Samuel Ward was your father?" Jack asked quietly. Emily nodded, confusion flickering across her face. "You knew him?" "Better than most," Jack murmured. The attacker, Ethan, rolled his eyes. "Great, another useless soldier come to rescue the cripple." Ranger growled, low and deep. Jack stepped closer to Ethan, shadows sharpening the hard lines of his face. "You're done," he warned. "Leave her alone." Ethan yanked his collar free with a snarl. "You have no idea what you're getting into." But his bravado cracked. The moment he backed away, Ranger advanced one step, and that alone sent Ethan stumbling. He threw one last glare at Emily, then walked off with a muttered threat. Emily sagged, the tension draining from her small frame. Jack retrieved her crutch, brushing dirt from the handle before handing it to her. "Thank you," she whispered. "You didn't have to." "Yes," Jack said simply. "I did." Because Samuel Ward had once stood between Jack and death more times than Jack could count. Because kindness deserved protection. Because Jack Carter had never been able to walk past injustice without feeling it carve something out of him. Emily looked up at him, eyes glossy with unshed tears. "He won't stop," she murmured. "They want everything. My father's savings, the house, all of it. They said I'm useless, that I don't deserve anything." Jack held her gaze, steady, unflinching. "You deserve to be safe, and you're not alone anymore." Ranger nudged her hand again, as if seconding that promise. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows behind them. The quiet between them grew heavier, deeper, charged with something neither had spoken yet. This was no longer a chance encounter. Fate had just rewritten its terms. And Jack Carter knew, with a soldier's certainty, his part in the story was far from over. The evening air thickened as Jack guided Emily carefully down the quiet residential street, Ranger pacing at her uninjured side like a silent guardian. The neighborhood was modest. Rows of small houses with peeling fences and yards kept alive more by memory than maintenance. But Emily's home stood apart in a subtle, sorrowful way. The paint on the porch railings was chipped, the front garden overtaken by wild growth, as if the house itself had been grieving alongside its owner. Emily hesitated at the gate, gripping her crutch a little too tightly. In the dim porch light, her face looked even younger, fragile in a way that tugged at something deep inside Jack. Still, she straightened her shoulders, an instinctive show of resolve. "It wasn't like this before," she murmured, embarrassment flickering across her features. "Dad tried his best to keep things in shape, but after he got sick, everything just stopped." Jack said nothing, but Ranger nudged Emily's hand gently before trotting ahead, nose twitching. The moment Emily pushed open the door, Ranger froze. His ears rose sharply, instincts sharpening into alert tension. Jack stepped in front of Emily immediately. The living room was a mess, not the kind of mess born of neglect, but the deliberate chaos left behind by someone searching for something. Drawers yanked open, cushions slashed, papers tossed across the floor in frantic disarray, a lamp shattered beside the sofa. Emily inhaled sharply, her eyes wide with distress. "No." "They didn't." Her voice broke. Jack scanned the room with the practiced precision of someone trained to assess danger before emotion. "Stay behind me," he said quietly. "Ranger, Tim." Ranger moved forward with a focused gait, sniffing the floor, furniture, and debris, weaving through the destruction with careful steps. Emily's breathing turned shaky as she knelt to pick up a framed photo of her father, Samuel Ward, tall and lean, with kind eyes and a warmth that radiated even through old paper. The glass had been broken. "He would have hated this," she whispered. Jack understood that more than she knew. Ranger barked once, short, urgent, then trotted toward the narrow staircase leading up to the attic. "He found something," Jack said. Emily followed cautiously, climbing one step at a time with her crutch, while Ranger stayed midway on the stairs as if urging her to continue, but refusing to leave her behind completely. When they reached the attic door, Jack pushed it open with controlled force. The attic was dusty, lit only by the faint glow of a small window. Old boxes were stacked in uneven towers, Christmas decorations, worn uniforms, rusted tools, but one corner stood oddly disturbed. Ranger went straight there. Jack knelt and noticed a section of floorboard slightly misaligned. He pried it up carefully. Beneath it lay a small steel box, old but sturdy, edges scraped from whoever had tried to open it before. Jack lifted it, feeling the solid weight. It wasn't large, but it was heavy in a way that suggested its contents mattered. Emily bit her lip. "Dad used to keep important things in metal boxes," she whispered. "Documents, photos, things he didn't want lost." Jack opened the lid. Inside were 3 items wrapped neatly in a plastic sleeve despite the rough search the house had endured. The original will of Samuel Ward, his military disability certificate, and a folded envelope containing property and land ownership documents in Emily's name. Emily stared as if struggling to breathe. He really left everything to me." Jack nodded, eyes narrowing as he considered the implications. "Someone knew these papers existed," he said quietly. "Ethan didn't tear this place apart for nothing. He was looking for these." Emily's lips trembled. "But why? If they found them—" "They'd destroy them," Jack said, "and that would leave you with nothing." Ranger leaned his head against Emily's thigh, grounding her. Jack shut the metal box and stood. "We're not taking chances," he said. "We need a lawyer." Emily blinked, startled. "I don't have money for—" "I didn't say your lawyer. I said mine." Louise Bennett lived 10 minutes away in a compact townhouse lined with wind chimes that tinkled in the soft breeze. He answered the door with a bemused expression. Louise was in his mid-40s, short and round-bellied with curly dark hair and thick glasses perched precariously on his nose. His beard was trimmed neatly into a square shape that made him look perpetually overwhelmed but strangely wise. "Jack," he said, blinking twice, "you only knock at my door when things are on fire." Jack lifted the steel box. "Then consider this smoke." Luis ushered them inside with exaggerated urgency. His living room was cluttered with books, legal pads, and 3 empty coffee mugs. He waved them toward a couch buried in papers, then began inspecting the documents with surprising speed. As his eyes darted between the signatures and stamps, his expression shifted from curiosity to focus, then to irritation. "These are legitimate," Luis muttered. "Completely valid. No loopholes, no ambiguity. This house, the savings, the land, they all belong to this young woman." He glanced at Emily with softened sympathy. "Your father protected you well." Emily wiped her eyes, nodding. "So Ethan has no claim." Louis snorted. "Not legally, not morally, not any way that matters." Jack felt something like relief settle deep in his chest. "And if they try to challenge her?" "Then they'll be fighting me," Louis replied simply. Ranger barked once in approval. Emily looked between the 3 of them, Jack, Ranger, Louis, and for the first time that day, a fragile, hopeful smile touched her lips. And as Jack watched her, he understood one thing with utter clarity. This fight wasn't over yet. But now, She wasn't fighting alone. Night settled slowly over the neighborhood, the kind of night that seemed to thicken the air rather than cool it. A single street lamp buzzed outside Emily's small house, flickering now and then like it wasn't sure it wanted to stay awake. Jack stood near the front window, arms folded across his chest, watching shadows tighten along the edges of the yard. Ranger paced near the door, every so often giving a quiet, uneasy huff. He sensed something long before it arrived. Emily sat on the couch, clutching the steel box close to her chest. In the warm lamplight, she looked smaller than usual, shoulders pulled in, fingers trembling slightly, her prosthetic leg resting stiffly against the carpet. Exhaustion clung to her, the kind built from months of fear rather than hours of lost sleep. Jack could see the emotional storm brewing inside her. He had witnessed it on soldiers before. People pushed too far, who finally found one line they couldn't cross alone. Louis Bennett had left an hour earlier after giving them specific instructions on what to do if Ethan returned. Louisa's small figure, round belly, curly hair, and glasses perpetually sliding down his nose, was not built for fighting, but he made up for it with legal sharpness. He had assured Emily the law was on her side, but law didn't always stop violence, and the pounding on the door came exactly as Jack feared. It wasn't the uncertain knock of a visitor. It was a violent, full-palmed slam that rattled the wood in its hinges. Ranger growled instantly, the fur along his spine bristling. Emily flinched hard, tightening her grip on the box. Jack motioned for her to stay behind him. "Don't open that door," a woman's voice shrieked from outside, sharp as broken glass. It was a voice steeped in bitterness, worn rough by years of anger. "Emily, you ungrateful brat, open up this instant." That was Carla, Emily's stepmother. Middle-aged, tall, with tightly curled blonde hair and a rigid posture that made her look like someone permanently offended by the world. She had the kind of face carved into disapproval. Thin eyebrows arched high, mouth pinched sharply as though she were tasting something sour. Jack peeked through the window. Carla stood in the yard, arms crossed, tapping one foot so violently it shook the hem of her expensive coat. Standing beside her was Ethan, broader than before in the stark outdoor light, pacing like a wolf shut out of its meal. His blonde hair was slicked from sweat or frustration, and the sharp angles of his face twitched with barely suppressed rage. "Emily!" Carla screamed again, pounding the door. "We know what you're hiding. Give us the papers." Emily's voice came out cracked and small. "They're mine. Dad left them to me." Carla scoffed loudly, her voice dripping with venom. "Your father was sick. He didn't know what he was doing. You are not taking my house." Jack opened the door just enough to step out, blocking their view of Emily. Ranger squeezed through with him, stance low, teeth visible beneath a quiet growl. Ethan froze but covered his fear with a scowl. "Stay out of this," he snapped, jabbing a finger toward Jack. "This is family business." Jack didn't flinch. Family doesn't break into someone's home and destroy everything. Carla stepped forward, raising a hand dramatically toward her chest like a wounded actress. "How dare you? This is my house." "It isn't," Jack said calmly, "and you know that." Ethan lunged toward the doorway. Jack caught him by the front of his shirt with one hand, pivoted, and pinned him against the wall beside the entrance with the ease of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. Ethan gasped, arms flailing. Carla shrieked. Ranger barked sharply beside them, flashing teeth in warning. Jack leaned in, voice low and sharp. "You will not lay a hand on her." Ethan pushed back, but he was outmatched. Jack's strength was quiet, practiced, unshakable. Carla's shrill voice broke the standoff. "I'm calling the police. You'll see what happens when real authority arrives." "Good," Jack replied. "Do that." Carla faltered, clearly not expecting that answer, and within minutes, flashing red and blue lights washed across the neighborhood. 2 police officers approached, one older with a salt and pepper mustache and tired eyes, the other younger. thin and stiff-backed like someone still getting used to the uniform. The older officer, Officer Harlan, rubbed his forehead as he recognized Ethan, perhaps not for the first time. "All right," he sighed. "Someone want to tell me what's going on now?" Carla immediately assumed command of the situation, pointing at Jack as if he were the perpetrator of every crime committed in the state. "That man assaulted my son, and that cripple girl is hiding documents that belong to us." Jack didn't respond. He simply stepped aside so Emily could hold out the steel box. Her hands still shook, but her voice did not waver. "These are legal documents. My father's will, his property, his military papers. They're all in my name." Officer Harlan examined the documents quietly, his tired eyes shifting from Emily to Carla to Ethan. Then he turned to Jack with a look that said this wasn't the first time he'd seen someone try to bully a disabled family member. "These appear legitimate," he said finally. Carla sputtered, face reddening in fury. "This is ridiculous. She doesn't deserve—" "Ma'am," Harlan interrupted gently but firmly, "you and your son need to leave. Tonight. If you continue causing disturbances, we'll take further action." Ethan clenched his jaw so hard the veins on his neck stood out, but even he recognized a losing battle. Carla dragged him away, muttering curses all the way to their car. When the flashing lights faded and silence settled again, Emily stood in the doorway, breath, shuddering. I feel safe," she whispered, almost in disbelief. Jack nodded, Ranger leaning against her leg with a soft whine. "You are," Jack said, "for the first time in a long while." And under that dark sky, for the first time in months, Emily Ward believed it. The late afternoon sun drifted lazily across the quiet neighborhood, painting soft gold along the edges of Emily's newly repaired porch. Weeks had passed since that violent night, and in that time the house had transformed, not only in appearance, but in spirit. The garden had been trimmed back to life, the windows repaired, the broken lamp replaced. A fresh coat of pale blue paint now covered the front door, a gentle color chosen by Emily herself. One, she said, reminded her of her father's old Navy uniform. Ranger sat proudly beside it, tail sweeping rhythmically across the boards, sensing the excitement beneath the calm air. Inside, the place no longer felt like a battlefield or a hiding place. The steel box rested safely in a cabinet, but its contents had already done their duty. Louise Bennett had worked tirelessly on the legal process, navigating paperwork with surprising ferocity for a man who often misplaced his own glasses. After days of signatures, meetings, and stern conversations conducted over coffee and legal pads, Emily had secured everything that rightfully belonged to her: the house, the land, and the savings her father had protected for years. But she hadn't once considered keeping it all for herself. The decision came one evening when she and Jack sat in the backyard watching Ranger chase fireflies in clumsy circles. Emily had leaned forward, her eyes bright, her hands nervously clasped around her mug. "Dad always said soldiers don't just fight battles. They carry them home," she had whispered. "But nobody teaches them what to do with those battles." Jack had looked at her, startled by the clarity of her voice and the wisdom beneath it. She continued, "I want to help them, Jack. I want to help people like him, like you." And so the idea was born, not from wealth, but from grief, gratitude, and an understanding deeper than words. Over the weeks that followed, Emily poured her heart into converting her father's old workshop and the unused lot behind the house into something new. A small but warm center for veterans struggling with PTSD, built around the healing power of dogs, specifically shepherds. Emily reached out to trainers, volunteer therapists, and local shelters. She even contacted a retired Army dog handler named Mara Collins, a middle-aged woman with short copper hair, weathered cheeks, and calm eyes that carried the quiet authority of someone who had spent her life working with canines. Mara was lean, with strong arms and a gentle voice that dogs obeyed instantly. She had scars along her forearms, thin white lines that told their own stories, no doubt formed during training missions or rescue operations. She had lost a partner in Afghanistan, a shepherd named Grit, and the grief still hung in the softness of her tone. When Emily shared her vision, Mara didn't hesitate. "If you're building a place where soldiers and dogs can rescue each other," she had said, "then I'm staying." Word of the center spread quietly among the veteran community. Men and women who once avoided public spaces found themselves drifting toward the house with the soft blue door. One of the first to arrive was Tom Reyes, a tall, broad-shouldered Marine in his late 40s with thick black hair and a beard that tried, and failed, to hide the sadness in his brown eyes. Tom carried a limp on his right side and wore old rain boots no matter the weather. Though imposing physically, he spoke with a gentleness that revealed a man exhausted by years of nightmares. Emily greeted him in the yard, and Ranger immediately trotted over to place his head in Tom's palm. Something in Tom's face cracked, then softened. "He can tell," he whispered. "Dogs always know." Another was Liam Burke, a quiet Army medic in his early 30s with sandy hair and square-framed glasses. His fingers trembled when he talked, and he startled easily at sudden noises. But when he knelt beside the shepherds Mar brought in for training, the shaking stopped. "I haven't felt calm in years," he murmured one afternoon. "This place feels different." Every new arrival added another thread to the tapestry Emily was weaving, a home built not of brick but of shared burdens and quiet understandings. Ranger quickly became the heart of it all. His calm presence, steady gait, and wise dark eyes made him the unofficial guardian of the center, the first therapy dog before the others could even begin training. He walked between the veterans during group circles, nudged trembling hands, and rested his head on laps when silence hurt too much. Jack found himself visiting the center daily, not because Emily needed his help, but because he needed it more than he had realized. Standing among men and women who carried invisible wounds like his own, he felt something loosen inside him, the lightest of weights, but a weight nevertheless. And Emily. Emily moved through the center with newfound strength. She still relied on her crutch, her steps uneven but resolute, but her voice held authority, compassion, and the quiet resilience of someone who had survived much yet refused to collapse. On the day of the official opening, neighbors gathered in the yard. A small wooden sign hung on the porch rail, carved by Jack from a fallen oak branch. "The Ward House of Healing." Emily stood before the modest crowd, wearing a simple white blouse and dark jeans, sunlight softening the lines of exhaustion that once shadowed her face. Jack stood beneath the porch awning, arms crossed, Ranger lying loyally at his boots. Emily's voice wavered at first, but steadied as she spoke. "My father believed broken hearts could heal each other if given a chance," she said softly. "Today, I finally understand what he meant." Jack felt a slow smile pull at the corner of his mouth. Ranger thumped his tail, and under the gentle glow of the fading afternoon sun, a new chapter began. Not built on fear, but on hope. Not on loss, but on healing. In the end, this story reminds us that miracles rarely arrive with lightning or thunder. They come quietly, through the courage of ordinary people who choose compassion when the world expects indifference. Some say healing is slow, fragile, uncertain, but those who have walked through darkness know that God often sends help in the form of unexpected friendships, loyal animals, or a single moment of bravery in the right place at the right time. Every life carries its own burdens, and every home hides silent battles. Yet grace remains within reach. When hearts refuse to turn cold, when we stand for one another, something divine begins to move. Perhaps that is the true miracle, that broken people, guided by God's gentle hand, can help heal each other. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who may need hope today. Leave a comment and let us know what part stayed with you. And don't forget to subscribe so we can continue bringing you stories that lift the spirit. May God bless you and your family, guide your steps, protect your home, and grant peace to your days.